So we did a acclimatization hike today. I think we're somewhere over 15,000 feet, but I don't know what the exact number is. The views are pretty spectacular up here. I'll show you. For somebody that doesn't really like heights, some of the parts of this trail are a little exciting. Today's really the first day that it didn't get so oppressively hot during the day. Yesterday during lunch I ate in a t-shirt. I don't know if it's because of the altitude or what, but it's getting a little bit warmer now. I'm kind of comfortable. I think we're gonna stop here and then go down to the tea house, which is actually pretty nice, and that'll be the day, just an acclimatization day. Say hi, Bob. Bob's had a rough climb.
Hello everyone, my name is Kyle Seegers. Today I'm here with Dr. Stoudt, who has recently gotten back from a trip to Everest over Christmas break. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Stoudt for joining me today and sharing his experience with me and the entire broadcasting program. So to start off, I would like to get your opinion. If you had to describe this trip in one word, what would you say?
In one word, I would say the trip was epic.
Epic. Why do you say that?
I went to Mount Everest, which is, I just can't think of anything personally that is any more epic than doing something like that. I've dreamt about going to Everest since I was 19 years old. I'm 46 now, so you could do the math. It has really just kind of consumed my life since I was 19. There was a disaster in 1996 during the climbing season that was made famous, or I guess infamous, by John Krakauer's book Into Thin Air. My brother read it first and then shared it with me, and it's the first book that I ever read from cover to cover in one sitting. I was just so captivated by it, and ever since I read that book, I've just consumed everything Everest. So as I was working on my dissertation, actually, there were multiple times during the dissertation that I was like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to continue. And the only thing that I could do to kind of keep my head in the game, so to speak, with my dissertation, I made a promise to myself. If I finish this, I'm going to Mount Everest. So it's really what allowed me to finish my dissertation, just that promise to myself. And then I finished my dissertation, and about a year later, I said to my brother, I finished it. I said we were going to go. Are we going to go or not? And January of 2023, we really seriously started planning it, and it just kind of went from there. But to actually, it's just been a lifelong goal, and to go there and just be out of my element in so many different ways, and actually make it to Everest Base Camp, which, before I went to Nepal, the highest I'd ever been was, I don't know, probably 2,000 feet out in the Allegheny Mountains out of my cabin. So to get to base camp, which is 17,600 feet, was just an unbelievable accomplishment, self-accomplishment. I don't know, I was just on cloud nine. There was just no better feeling than to be standing there at base camp and looking up at Mount Everest. It was so rewarding.
Mm-hmm. So you said you started planning this back in January of 2023, so it took you almost a year to plan.
Correct.
Can you take us through the preparations that you took? Things signed, things you had to pack, all of that kind of stuff.
So in January of 2023, a group of us met. Initially, it was my brother, myself, my good friend Jake, and then Mr. Flick was part of the conversation. And we sat down, and I mean, one of the first things we did was look for a tour company that we were going to go with. None of us felt comfortable enough to travel to Nepal, go to Lukla, which is where the Everest trek starts, and trek from Lukla to base camp without any kind of guides, Sherpa guides. So we did some research online and actually settled with a company called G Adventures. I'd taken lots of trips before with the school, with teaching Spanish. I mean, I've been to Mexico, I've been to Spain a bunch of times. So I had different travel companies that I was used to going with. This was such an extreme adventure, so to speak. Like, none of them do the Everest base camp trek. So it was actually Mr. Flick who found the G Adventures company that we went with. But we didn't actually book with G Adventures until I think it was September, and by that point, Mr. Flick had ruled out that he wasn't going to be able to go. My buddy Jake wasn't going to be able to go, so it was just down to my brother and I, and he and I just kind of looked at each other. So are we still going to do this, just the two of us, or not? But we ended up booking with them, and the travel arrangements to Nepal, we actually went with Qatar Airways. Flew out of JFK. I would say the flying, I've flown a lot in my life, but I've never been on an airplane quite as long as I was on for this trip. So JFK to Doha, Qatar, where we flew into, it was about 14 hours. And then from Doha to Kathmandu was about another 5. So going over, it was 19. And then coming back to the States, it was over 20, just because of the way that the winds are.
Yeah.
But man, 14 hours on one airplane is a long stinking time.
Were those the 14 to 5? Were they back to back?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a layover in Doha, but it was only like an hour, 2 hours, and you're trying to get from your terminal from the airplane to wherever the next terminal is that you have to board. So we really didn't sit around a whole heck of a lot. We intentionally booked the planes that we did, so we didn't have long layovers. But it was a full day going and a full day coming back. It's actually how I spent Christmas Day, was entirely on an airplane. But it's the other side of the world, so never ever had been to Asia. I was just really out of my element a lot. I'm not really a person that likes heights, so that was something. As far as like preparation, my brother and I kind of took different approaches to preparing for the trip. I was kind of I was a fitness nut for a year. I literally walked anywhere from 3.8 to 7 miles a day, every day, for a year. And I bet you in that year I may have missed maybe 10 days. Other than that, it was 3.8 to 7 miles a day. Lifted weights. I wanted to be as physically fit as I could be. And I wanted my body to be conditioned to walking those kind of distances and being able to just recover. So in that regard, I felt like when I was on the trip, I felt like I was very physically fit. Yeah. But I will tell you, like, there was absolutely, and I knew it, there was nothing you could do to prepare for the altitude. Yeah. And the fact that I'd only ever been to maybe 2,000 feet in the mountains out at my camp, like, the altitude really, like, it really plays with your mind because you're tired all the time. You can't catch your breath, and like your muscles just hurt. because they're not getting the oxygen that we are getting here. So
Yeah.
standing there at Everest Base Camp, you're breathing half the oxygen that there is right here at essentially sea level.
Yeah.
Half. And it does crazy things. You can't sleep. Night times were the worst because the tea houses, while the common room where we ate would be heated during mealtime, by like 8 o'clock, the heat was no more. So night times I found to be the worst, just because you would go into your room, which is essentially nothing more than a plywood box with 2 beds, no insulation, no heat, and get into your sleeping bag a little after 8 and try to sleep until 6 in the morning or so. But inevitably I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and not be able to get back to sleep. And at that point, it's so cold, you just stay in your sleeping bag, and you're just in your sleeping bag with your thoughts for 2 hours until it starts to get light and people start moving around. The altitude gives you nightmares. Everyone that was in our group complained of nightmares throughout. Once we got really above 10,000 feet, 12,000 feet, Namche Bazaar and beyond, everyone complained of nightmares during the nighttime, which everything that I had read, I'd never read that, but yet everyone that was in our group complained about it. You really lose your appetite. I lost 17 pounds during the course of the trek. 17 pounds. Now, I put most of it back on when I got back to the States. But every day, my diet consisted of, for breakfast, I would have toast and jam, maybe hard-boiled eggs. For lunch, I would have plain rice. Sometimes I would get like a soup, but that would be it. And then in the evening, I would have some kind of pasta and boiled potatoes. As far as drinks go, there was no Mountain Dew in Nepal. And as you know, like I have to have my Mountain Dew each day, so I kind of detox from the caffeine. Really, the only drinks I had, water, Sherpa tea. They make really good hot tea. I would have lemon tea or honey tea and hot chocolate. And that's pretty much all that I was drinking. But yeah, it really, as much as I prepared here and I felt physically fit, nothing could really prepare you for the altitude. And I think that was kind of that was always going to be the X factor. How were we gonna adjust to the altitude? Now, my brother and I, and actually everyone that was in the group with us except for one, were taking altitude meds. So went to the doctor, had a complete physical before I went, just because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to go over there and have a heart attack on the trail, or reasonably sure that I wasn't going to. Yeah. And when I went to the doctor, I talked to them about getting something called Diamox, which I had read was a good high altitude medication that people going to base camp, or even the people that are climbing the mountain, will take that. Essentially what Diamox does is it allows your body to produce more red blood cells, which allows you to absorb more oxygen from each breath. Like I said, there's half the oxygen at base camp that there is at sea level, so any more oxygen that you can absorb, the better. So we were on Diamox, which I definitely think helped out quite a bit in getting to the higher altitudes. The whole entire trek, I never really got sick in any way because of the altitude. Now, I got what they call the Khumbu cough. This at base camp back here, it's the Khumbu Glacier that comes down from Everest. It's from breathing the dry, cold air. I just developed this cough that kind of started the day before we got to base camp, and then it lingered with me until we got back to the States, and I actually had to go to the doctor and got on an antibiotic and a steroid, and you can still kind of hear it in my voice. It's still not right. My brother came home with double pneumonia, and spent the day after we got home in the emergency room. They were looking for pulmonary edema, which was, I mean, that would have been really serious. He didn't have it, thank goodness, but it took a toll on our bodies for sure.
So how long did you guys spend in total on the trip?
Okay. So the total trip, we left the house the night of December 7th, and then returned early in the morning, got back to JFK at like, I don't know, it was early in the morning on the 26th, 2 o'clock in the morning or so. 3 o'clock in the morning is when I walked back in the door at home. So really, as far as the trek goes, the trek itself was 13 days. But then the other days were the flying days, and then just time that we were in Kathmandu.
Gotcha. So can you take me through some of the things you packed? Because obviously you did your research and
Yes.
you were very prepared. Can you take me through some of those things?
Yeah. My brother is kind of while he didn't do the fitness regimen that I did, he was the one that was like hardcore into the planning of it, and we need to have this and we need to have that. So I give all the credit to my brother in terms of just the gear that we took. I didn't, just normal like cold weather clothing I had from living in Pennsylvania and going hunting, and so like the long johns and the heavy socks and that kind of stuff I had to buy more because I was going over there. I didn't have like a day pack for trekking, a backpack that I would carry with me during the day. You had to have we took dry bags, they're called, for most of our gear, because as you do the trek, you have Sherpa porters. Sherpa are the local people that live there in the Khumbu Valley. So we actually had 2 bags that we packed. We had our day pack, which we carried during the trek, and that couldn't be any heavier than 12 pounds. And then there was like the other pack that had our gear in it that the Sherpa porters would carry. That couldn't be any heavier than 22 pounds. So while we were gone for a really long time, and we weren't really sure like what kind of conditions we were going to encounter, we were limited in how much we could take by those weight limits. I mean, we could only have a little over 30 pounds of gear. Well, I mean, if you start packing for a trip, 30 pounds isn't a whole heck of a lot. So that was difficult because as we're packing, we're weighing our gear and realizing, okay, well, I wanted to take, this many pairs of pants, but I can't because I'm way overweight. So it was cold weather gear. What a lot of people don't really understand is Everest is actually just north of the tropics. So while the nighttime gets really cold, the daytime was hot. This is the jacket that I wore on the trek, and most days when we're walking, I was wearing this and just a t-shirt underneath. The sun would come up and it would get oppressively hot. The one day I trekked in just a t-shirt. Now, as we got higher, it stayed a little bit colder during the day. But most of the days, I would say, were anywhere in the upper 30s, 40 degrees. But the angle of the sun just made it feel so much hotter when the sun was up. But as soon as the sun went behind the mountains, boy, the temperature just really dropped. So night times were in the teens or single digits. I don't ever think it got below 0. Maybe the last day when we were at a village called Gorak Shep, which is near Everest Base Camp, it might have been below 0 at nighttime. But like I said, nothing is heated, nothing is insulated. So sleeping in those temperatures was pretty miserable.
How much did you cover when you were sleeping? 'Cause obviously, you
That's
had
a
a
good
sleeping
question.
bag, and
So we got the down-filled sleeping bags, and mine was rated for down to negative, I forget what it was, negative 30 or something like that. So it was a really good quality sleeping bag. But even at that, when we were at Gorak Shep, when we were at Le Boucher, which is the town before Gorak Shep, um, I would have on 2 to 3 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of long johns, a pair of sweatpants, um, two layers of long johns up top, a hoodie, a scarf wrapped around my face, a beanie, gloves. Like, like I was going on a polar expedition or something. It got cold, and when you try to sleep when you're cold like that, it's not real nice. So, wearing that many layers and in that sleeping bag, I could sleep,
yeah,
but you didn't want to get out of your sleeping bag in the morning. I'll tell you that.
yeah. So could you tell me more about the lodgings? What kind of like amenities did the lodgings have? I know
Yeah,
you said
that's a good question. Very basic.
yeah.
So, when you go to do the trek, you have to fly from Kathmandu into an airport called Lukla.
Mhm.
Lukla is the most dangerous airport in the world. You're flying on an extremely small airplane, and the runway is actually angled like this.
Mhm.
So when you land, you're going up, and when you take off, you're going down, down the angle. I have pictures of it that I'm sure you can
Yeah.
watch, and I actually filmed the landing. Once you land at Lukla, there's nothing automated. There's no cars, there's no motorbikes, there's no mopeds, there's no four-wheelers, there's nothing. Everything is either human powered or animal powered. So when you're walking on the trail, you share it with the trains of mules and the trains of yaks or zapkia that are carrying supplies from village to village. Everything that gets there either on the back of a person or on the back of one of those animals. So you don't have the kind of amenities that you have even remotely close to here in the States. When you would go to these tea houses, and I do think that we stayed at nice tea houses, all things considered, I believe that they were nice. When we were at the lower villages, our room was basically a plywood box that had 2 beds, and then we would have a toilet in our room. When you got up into the higher elevations, there was basically like a common toilet that everyone shared, and inevitably it froze at nighttime. The toilets don't flush like the toilets here. There's a big 50-gallon drum of water next to it that you scoop the water out and dump into the toilet, and that kind of pushes the water in the toilet down and out, and that's how you flush it. But nighttime's got so cold that you would go there and the toilet would be frozen. So sometimes you'd actually have to scrape ice off of the toilets. There would be electricity in your room in the lower elevations because they depend on hydroelectric, and they have a pretty consistent electric source. The higher elevations, it's all solar generated electricity. So by 8 or 9 o'clock at night, the batteries are empty, and there's no electricity in the tea house. So it was very basic. They were clean.
Yeah.
I think that the people did a really nice job of keeping things clean. I thought that the food, while basic. Again, everything has to be carried in on the back of a person or
Yeah.
an animal. So it's not like you were able to have steaks and burgers and everything like that every day. It
Yeah.
was just kind of basic meals, like I said, rice, eggs, toast. But yeah, the accommodations were very, very basic. I'll tell you, the first night that I was home, the thing that I was most grateful for was just being able to walk down the hallway and enter a warm bathroom that flushed. Like it seems so like crazy, but that was like a luxury when I got home after the 3 weeks that we were over there.
So you said most of it was solar and hydro. How'd you go about charging things like phones, cameras?
Yep.
Stuff
So at the lower elevations, because they had the hydroelectric, they had a consistent electric source. We actually had outlets in our room.
Yeah.
I bought adapter, Nepalese adapter on Amazon before I left, and just plug the adapter in, plug your phone into that, and you're good to go. Once we got higher, there was no electric in our room. The only way that we were able to charge, I had taken battery packs along, and I just charged my phone from them. But I mean, I didn't have cell service.
Yeah.
I would buy wireless internet. When we got to the tea house each night, I would buy a wireless internet card, which gave me basically enough internet to text my wife and say, I'm still alive, this is where we are, this is where we're going next. And I was able to kind of upload pictures, for the most part, pictures into a shared folder that we had shared with family and friends back here. And that was it. So it's not like I was really draining the battery on my phone a ton, taking pictures and videos during the day. But I mean, I knew when we got higher and the battery packs that I had, I knew how much charge I had, and I was just real particular about not having my phone out a bunch and taking pictures or videos, because I was limited in how much charge I had, and I did not want my phone to go dead. And then once we got to base camp and we worked our way back down, we got to a point where we got into the hydroelectric again, and I was able to charge.
Yeah.
So neither one of us ever ran out of power.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So could you take me through some of the challenges you encountered? I know you talked a little bit about like the altitude, the amenities, the cold.
So there are so many things on this trip that took me out of my element. The first significant challenge was just getting on board that plane to fly to Lukla, because I knew the statistics, and I knew that it was the most dangerous airport in the world. I didn't have any intention of going to Everest to not come back, but I knew the risk that just comes with being on that plane. But I managed to just kind of suck it up. We all did. My brother doesn't like to fly at all, and we all got on that little plane, and I will say that the flight did not disappoint in terms of the fear factor. It was the most terrifying flight I've ever been on in my life. I've never been on a plane that small, and you really just feel everything. And you're flying straight into the Himalayas, and you look out the mirror of the window of the airplane, and all you see in front of you are mountains. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to crash right into the mountains. And the pilot, and these guys, these pilots are the best of the best in the Nepalese military that fly in and out of Lukla. They reminded me of Maverick and Goose from Top Gun.
Yeah.
Like they're wearing their flight jackets, the bomber jackets, the leather ones, the aviators. But boy, you're flying right at the Himalayas, right at the mountains, and they bank hard left and they bank hard right, and next thing you see in front of you is the Lukla runway, and you're either landing on the runway or crashing into the mountains. Fortunately, we landed on the runway and started the trek. So that was a big obstacle for sure. as soon as we got off the plane at Lukla, I had, I guess it would be like a mild panic attack. It wasn't like a full-blown one, but we went from 4,000 feet elevation at Kathmandu to 9,500 feet at Lukla. And when I got off that airplane, I felt like I couldn't breathe. And that was scary.
Yeah.
Because I could not, I was breathing, but I felt like I was suffocating. So getting into
Just made it across the Hillary Bridge. I'm so out of breath.
So quick.
It was terrifying, but I did it.
And then the other really terrifying thing that I was dreading going over were the suspension bridges. There's about 16 suspension bridges that you have to cross, and I have pictures and videos of them. But those things are, for somebody that doesn't like heights, they were absolutely terrifying. I don't even know how. I forced myself to go across the Hillary Bridge, which is the highest one, and you share them with the animal trains that are going through. So as we're going across the Hillary Bridge, a mule train came behind us, and when the animals get on those bridges, the bridges really start bouncing and swaying, and that was pretty scary. And there were sections of the trail, a lot of sections of the trail that were just super exposed on one side, so that if you took a wrong step, you're horribly broken or dead. Quite a bit of the trail, there were sections like that, and that was scary, because if you hear the bells of the animals coming, you'd be hugging the mountainside, and the animals would walk past, and you would just hope that the animals didn't, either the yaks didn't gore you with their horns or knock you off the knock you off the trail. So lots of things that really kind of tested the nerves. It was very physically demanding. It's 80 miles round trip, so 80 miles of walking. So physically demanding, and then it was just very mentally demanding, just to endure all that and face your fears, and live with the cold nights and everything like that.
And then did the tour guides and all the people that you were on the trip as well, did they all speak English? Was there any sort of language?
That's also a good question.
Barrier?
So everyone over there, everyone that we ran into, spoke English. The group that we were in, there were 9 of us. My brother and I from the States. There was a gentleman from the United Kingdom, a gentleman from India that was currently living in Texas, and then 5 of the people were Australian. So all of them spoke English. But all of our Sherpa guides and our Sherpa porters, they all spoke English, very good English. All of the people that worked at the tea houses, they all spoke excellent English. And all of the different groups that we ran into on the trail, there was actually a Japanese group that, while they weren't trekking with our group, we were kind of on the same schedule, so we ran into each other quite a bit. I spoke to them often, and they spoke excellent English. So everyone that we ran into over there spoke excellent English, and we didn't have any communication issues whatsoever. I tried to learn some Nepalese, but really it came down to namaste, which is just a general greeting, dandebad, which is thank you, and then our Sherpa guide would always yell to us, "Jem Jem," and Jem Jem meant that we needed to get moving, move a little bit faster. We were going too slow for him.
Okay, so lastly, I just one, your reflection on the trip? I know you've said to people that this was
Yeah.
life-changing.
Yes.
So could I hear how?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer. The trip was life changing for me, without a doubt. I mean, it was very few people ever get to do or ever really dare to do the thing that they dream most of doing. And I dreamt so long of going to Everest, and I knew. I honestly, it was a dream. Like, I didn't actually think I would ever do it because it just seemed like such a crazy thing to do. My parents, when they knew that my brother and I were both going, my parents were obviously super concerned and didn't want us to do it because there go both boys to the other side of the world to go to Everest. But I mean, just I've realized that, you know, there's just so much here in our daily lives that's just noise. And over there, like, every day, it was just the only thing that I was thinking about was surviving that day and making it from wherever we were, Namche Bazaar to Tangboche. And it was so peaceful in that regard. And I hope that's something that feeling is something that I never lose, because it was a kind of peacefulness that I've never felt before.
Yeah.
I got to sit in the Tangboche monastery and listen to the monks do their chants. It was surreal. I became so much more grateful for the things that I have because of being over there, and, you know, just for the 3 weeks that we were there, not having.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does put a whole different perspective on just how good we truly have it. I realized that I'm so much stronger mentally and physically than even I thought I was, because there were so many times when I was so tired, and you just wanted to just sit down and you just wanted to stop, but thankfully my brother was there, and I think he and I were a good support system for each other. We just kind of, you know, talked to each other and good motivators for each other, and you just kind of powered through. I'm not sure how many people that knew that I was going to Everest. I don't know how many people actually thought that I would get to base camp. But like I said, to go there and do the complete trek, to actually make it to Everest Base Camp, to achieve a goal that truly was a lifelong goal, was just an unbelievable feeling. But yeah, definitely life-changing. I was just so overwhelmed by everyone that we encountered on this trip. Was just so genuinely nice. Everyone, genuinely nice. Just great people that were just happy to have us there and in their country, and, you know, to experience that culture, that way of life, even though I was only there for a short amount of time. I don't know how anyone that does that can't come back just a changed person. I mean, it really was an epic trip of a lifetime, for sure.
So there's one last question, something me making your thought of. What was harder, just climbing Everest or coming back and being off principle?
What was harder?
Yeah.
Yeah, that also a good question. You're full of them here today. I think what has been hard for me is I'm always one, like, I always set goals for myself. Just always, my whole life I've done that. So professionally, like, I have my professional goals, and I've always worked real hard and continued my education from, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a Spanish teacher, and went to school, got my degree, was a Spanish teacher.
Yeah.
And then it was, okay, I want to become a principal. Went to school, got my principal certificate, became principal. Okay, I want to get my doctorate. So I went to school, got my doctorate. Everest has always been that one goal, kind of like the thing on your bucket list. That, what do you do after you've gone to Everest? And I think that's what I'm struggling with the most. Make no mistake, like, I was at base camp looking up at the summit of Everest, and it never once did it cross my mind, I want to go and climb that mountain now. Like, my goal was always, my Everest was getting to Everest base camp. So while some people will say, well, go and climb it now, that, for me, that would just be almost a certain death sentence. My brother and I were actually the oldest people on the trek by quite a bit. The Australians that were in our group were in their late 20s or early 30s. The Sherpa porters were all in their 20s or early 30s. I'm 46. My brother's 50. So it was hard on us. I told you when we came back. I mean, both of us went to the doctor. He had to go to the emergency room, for crying out loud. But yeah, I think what I'm struggling with the most isn't coming back to school. It's, what do you do after you've gone to Everest? Like, what's my next goal? Because that's just the kind of person that I am. I always have a goal in front of me that I work toward. I'm still doing my walking regimen. I'm still doing my lifting regimen. I can't get myself out of that habit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I was talking to my wife, and one thing that I would like to do is do the Camino de Santiago in Spain, but I think that that's going to be something that will most likely wait until I am old enough to retire, because that's a pretty extensive trek that you do in northern Spain. But yeah, it wasn't hard to come back to school. It's hard for me to think what's next.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with me and our whole program. And hearing that as someone who wants to go to Everest someday, it's nice to kind of have a little bit of now extra knowledge that I didn't know before, like things about like altitude, things you packed, like the language barriers, the camps, the tea houses and stuff. It's nice to learn about that. So if I do ever end up going in the future, that it's something I can put in the back of my mind.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
It's December 22nd. We made it back to Lukla today. So 12 days ago, we left here and started our journey. 80 miles we covered, give or take. There was some extra little side acclimatization hikes and whatnot that were included in that. So well over 80 miles. Definitely a trip that was mentally, physically, and emotionally just exhausting. But it feels good to be back here where it started and have it done. Looking forward to flying out of here tomorrow and getting back down to Kathmandu and actually having heat. It was a pretty crazy adventure, and one that I don't really think I could have done without having Bob along. So it's pretty special memory that he'll and I'll have. What a great trip.